There's some real quick business we need to do before the program starts, and it has to do with a email that was sent out yesterday regarding an expenditure for the trailer. And a little background, we've now followed the process that we probably should have followed yesterday. The board, the NPO, the staff has approved this, the NPO board has approved this, and I sent out an email asking members to approve it, but we had one dissenting vote, and since it was sent out as a, what was it, no contest? Yeah, without objections, so since we did have a vote against it, I need to get a running vote. So, I don't see many of the people that haven't voted yet on here, but I'm just going to run through a roll call of those who have not yet voted.
Can you just hold on just a second? Can we please note that the staff has approved this?
I did say that.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry, didn't hear that.
I didn't hear it either.
Mike, I did say it.
It's in the minutes.
Okay, in the minutes, good.
So, Brennan Page, are you on? That'd be no. Gary Freeman? Bill Wooten?
Yes.
You're here. Have you voted? You haven't voted there, right?
No, I haven't voted, but I voted affirmative.
Okay. David D. Okay. Jim Rooney? Alan Wild?
Yes.
Brad Tombaugh?
Yes.
Jake Pugeko?
Yes.
Paige Fagan? All right. The vote is 22-1 in favor of the expenditure. Passes. Brad, did you come on late?
You said yes.
Oh, did you?
You did say yes.
Yeah. You must have been muted. I didn't hear it.
Was it 23?
It took him a second just because he had unmute.
That's 23.
23.
Yeah, I'm just slow.
Randy? Any? Dick? Yes. Anything before we get started? For the team? Couple things.
You might want to go up there and get on speaker.
Just want to let everybody know that we've now got 60 members. We've got 3 in our intake rosters, so we've been picking up members, which is good. I also wanted to bring up, actually I'll let Andy talk about it, but possible coming events that we want to put on the calendar. We got the 30-30s, mad gravel bike race possibly, poker run and field day. So Danny, you want to say anything about those?
I guess there's still not too much possible, or to talk about yet. The Mad Gravel, May 16th is a possible. We won't know until probably end of March or so whether it's going to be happening, what capacity they're going to ask for us. 30-30 was June 12th, right? I think.
June, 30-30 is June 12th.
June 12th. Not an ARESDEC event or R1D5. It is more a North Central Region and Oxcom event, although the majority of the players are, well, I should say majority, there's quite a few others, but we usually have pretty good showing there. Poker Run, still unsure if it's going to be June 13th and the fall one in September, if they're going to combine and do one in the late summer, early fall situation. Field Day, Randy will probably talk about that just a little bit. Tour de Cure is going to be virtual this year, not going to be normal like it is. Turkey Day 5K, have you heard anything, Perry?
Have not.
A little early to be thinking about that one, I guess. Wrong spot. Yeah, that's it for events right now. Said mostly up in the air still. Hopefully 30 will happen. It sounds like they're really pushing to make it work. That's it for now. Hopefully we'll have the trailer ready by the time next one comes around.
And trailer progress has been coming along. We've got basically the, what should I say, the basic trailer is done now, and our next project now is to fit it out. And that's, we're gonna have a meeting, which I will arrange for the, trailer planning committee to come up with how we're gonna proceed from here to where we wanna outfit it. And then once that's done, we'll present that, to the, staff and then the NPO board and get the approvals for what we wanna do. So that's coming along. The only other thing I want to bring up was, actually Denny might want to mention this, but the ARESDEC, which we really need out in Elbert County, I believe it's going to go on the, Similar Road and Bridge Tower, right?
Yeah.
And, actually, Perry, you want to say anything about that? Since you've kind of been on
The only thing to say is that it's a really good spot, and ECA is willing to do a lot of the work for us at that location. We are abandoning our efforts to get on the State Tower in Simla, and we'll be going on the Road and Bridge Tower instead.
We hope to get that done before tornado season gets in the foul weather, so we have good coverage out in that area. That's about it. There's not much going on. I think everybody had the COVID shots that was able to get them, so that's good. So we've, thank you, Perry, for working that for us.
Dick, when you're done, I've got one small information.
Sure, go ahead.
Business, so. Okay.
One up.
Yeah, so for those of you who don't know me, I'm John Bloom, ARESDEC member and also the Colorado Section Emergency Coordinator. One thing that's going to be coming up and that you'll be hearing something about, last spring, the Department of Homeland Security Emergency Management here in Colorado increased the number of regions in there and the number of service field managers from 9 to 10. And what they did was they broke up the north central region into an east and north. They still have the northeast. This really has no impact to any Ares district operation other than there's going to be some new lines drawn on the map, and there'll be a new regional emergency coordinator for Douglas County. So the way DHSEM drew the map, they separated Douglas and Elbert County. And the last thing that anyone wants to do is break up a functional district. So even though on their map, Elbert County is part of the east region and Douglas County is part of the north, Elbert and Douglas will still be part of the north region. And really how they reorganize it is kind of along like the East I-70 corridor and the I-25 corridor. So now the new north region, Larimer, they did the same thing with Larimer and Wall too. They split them up in between two regions, and they're a very functional district. So once again, they're going to stay together. But the new north region, which ARESDEC is a member of, goes Larimer County and Weld County, Boulder, Broomfield, Jeffco, Gilpin, Clear Creek, Douglas, Elbert. So that'll be the new region. And then the new east region will be Adams, Arapahoe, Denver. On the map, it's Elbert, but Elbert's staying with Douglas. And then Lincoln, Kit Carson, and Cheyenne, which there's not a lot going on out east, but we have had some contact with a club out there, and they've got relationships with the Lincoln County emergency manager. And I think maybe that might be one place where Douglas Elbert can kind of help out too. The guys out in Lincoln, they are pretty green, and they might need some help in bringing them into the Ares fold here in the state. So if you guys can kind of help out with that, there's a lot of talent here, and ARESDEC has a lot of good systems. So, but once again, you'll hear more about this regioning. It doesn't impact the districts really at all, other than Adams, Denver, and Arapahoe had to change from R1 to R10. So, but operations stay the same. We didn't burn any bridges or close any roads between Douglas and Arapahoe counties. So, please maintain those relationships. Anyone have any questions?
what's the new District 10?
It's the east, which goes out along the east I-70 corridor. You know, and one thing that makes sense too, Mark Body, who is Randy's deputy, and he's the current interim North Central region, he's going to be taking that east. He has participated for a number of years on the east I-70 public safety. There's a big commission, a lot of public safety agencies.
I-70 corridor or something.
Yeah, it's the east I-70 corridor of public safety. We'll just use that because we don't know the real term. But he's been a member of that. He's got relationships there. So this will be actually a good fit for the new region, having Mark a part of that. He goes to their meetings on a regular basis. So I think this is nothing but positive, and I can't think of anything negative other than, you know, a handful of districts are going to have to change some digits on their website.
So
Buy all new shirts.
You will still say R1D5. Yeah. So we won't have the consecutive numbering in Region 1 like we did. I think we lose Region 2 or District 2 or something like that, but that doesn't matter.
Well, you said Arapahoe and.
Adams, Arapahoe, Denver go east now.
So you lose 1, 2, and 4.
Douglas, or excuse me, Larimer Well would be the new one. And yeah, so we lose 4 and 2. It doesn't really matter much. So, and you know, there's other regions in the state that we don't have consecutive numbering in already. So
Does the state still call them all hazards regions, or do they call them homeland security regions?
they still, for grant purposes, they're still talking about the 9 all hazard regions because there are current grants in place, you know, that were written according to that. So I think they're vague on that on the website right now. I didn't see either of those terms used. But if you want to see the new map, go to DHS-EM, Field Services. They've got the map of the 10 different regions now. And you know, one of the things too is we just want to make sure that we have that field service area manager, one-to-one correspondence with our region teams. So that there's something happens in that region, the state region, they know who to call if they want to get hold of their areas. They don't have to go through a phone list.
East I-70 corridor mass shelter care plan.
That's what it is.
Excellent.
All good.
Okay, if no one has any questions, I'll let you get on with the program. Thanks.
Thanks for keeping us together.
Yeah.
There was, when I saw that, there's no way we couldn't do that.
Right.
Anything else before I kick off?
That's it.
Did you want to talk about
You want
field
field day?
day?
Just real briefly about field day, I'm sure everybody's heard my spiel and you're gonna get tired of it by June, but I'm gonna keep doing it. Practice, 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 listening to HF, especially when there's contests on. It will help you immensely if you wanna come do voice for field day. I think CQ Worldwide was last weekend. I don't know if anybody got to listen. I played a little bit. Yeah, some context. I didn't even submit a log, but practice, practice, practice on that. Just listening, so you pick up calls and you can do it quickly. I would like to do a simulation a couple of weeks before field day for people for logging. That would help people. If we could actually do it online, it might be difficult. But we might try to do that. The afternoon after BE testing 2 weeks before field day. But I'd like to do that to help people out with logging. And we're going to be running a digital station. If you have the opportunity to go play with JS8 Call, not FT8, but JS8 Call, download it and play with it. There's a bunch of people out there that use it. It is more of a chat program. You're not restricted to the 13 characters that FT8 uses. It actually works like a keyboard chat. And it's kind of fun to play with it. And it goes through amazingly well. I mean, you can't
Still
even
time
hear.
synced though?
It is still time synced.
And you can select your interval.
And you can select your interval and you can select your speed. So if you've got a really solid connection to somebody, you can make the contact in like 4 seconds. You can pass the string in 4 seconds. I think it's an 81 character string, something like that.
Close to that.
Or if it's a really ratty signal, it can take like 2 minutes.
And
But it will also concatenate strings. So it's actually actually, there's a lot of people looking at it as being possibly a really good, system for emergency communications, especially with poor signal or local weak signal.
And you can load keys with text, just like,
Yeah.
like DigiPan or an
Yeah,
NPSK.
like PSK.
Yeah,
Yeah,
which will make
But-
it nice for people.
but for field day, we need somebody to take the digital station under their wing. But JS8 call, PSK 32, what other forms? There's,
FT8, we're doing FT8?
it can't be FT8. FT8 is not allowed on field day.
Oh, really? Last year was.
It's not allowed this year on field day. No. That's JS8 call, but no FT8. Unless they change, the rules, they said the rules are published, but the rules that are published are last year's rules, so they may change that. Yeah. Yeah, all the stuff that says it's ready to go for this year is all last year's stuff, so they haven't got their stuff together yet.
Any decision on the GOTA?
Unless we have somebody that is just absolutely enthralled with running the GOTA station and wants to do the whole thing, I say we don't do it. It was way more brain damage than we got points.
It's better to take a newbie or an unlicensed person and just sit them down here at a control op, and let them make a contact or two. It counts.
Yeah, it's better to do it at the regular station than it is to do it at the GOTA station, because if they don't make 20 contacts on the GOTA station, it doesn't count for
Yeah,
squad.
that's the part that really,
Yeah. It doesn't even count one point for one contact. It's 0 if they don't make 20.
And it consumes strength.
Well, no, it doesn't. It doesn't count.
Well, that's right, it does not.
But it consumes the time it takes to set it up and all the
And people help.
brain damage and everything to make it
Last year was
happen.
a real GOTA.
Yeah, last year, well,
Was it the GOTA when we had the problem?
we had lots of issues last year with the GO station. So I would prefer to do CW digital voice. That pretty well covers our 3A.
so,
We have, by the way, we do have, shelters for all the stations now. We've had, a couple of people volunteer shelters, and one of them, I can't say who it is, but it's a really nice RV. Roberts is not available, or at least he says it's not. Do you know if he sold it? It's sold. Is it sold? So, I thought it was going away.
100 Watts and a Wire, they have a website and podcast and stuff. They have a tune-up contest June 11th to 13th.
Oh, neat,
Runs
for
just
field
like
day?
Field day, yeah.
Oh, that'd be fun to get people involved in.
Yeah. So,
Give me the information on that, and we'll pass it around as a,
I'll zip you the website.
because people can get on that and play by themselves, which is different than on everyone. All right, that's all I got, but I really want to see it, I'd love to see us run the voice station and the CW station 24 hours this time, without a break.
Yeah, we need some CW out there.
And we need CW operators. How you doing, David? You getting there? Eric, we made it. Bill Coleman. You sure you made it?
Pardon?
This looks like you.
This is Christopher.
Hey, Christopher.
Crofty is my grandson.
We'll be seeing you Saturday.
You will be seeing him Saturday. Yes, sir. So far,
Are you gonna be a CW operator for us at Field Day? Are you gonna be a CW operator for us at Field Day?
Well, no, you know I'm not, but he's actually talking about at least learning it.
Well, that's good.
Very cool. All right, but please clear your calendar that weekend, June 26th, 27th?
Yeah.
And we start set up on the Friday before noon.
From what I've heard about field day, it
25th
sounds
is-
very interesting, probably gonna come.
Good. Cool.
Awesome. Any other announcements?
Has everybody signed in?
Sounds like two new riders.
All right. Presentation here. So the reason I'm doing a little presentation on a brief history of cryptography is that the topic has always fascinated me, and there are specific things about cryptography that I'll get into, and you can already probably detect the pattern by looking at the titles of these books. There are specific things about cryptography that fascinate me. So for the company that I work for, every 2 weeks we call it a tech talk, happy hour, whatever. Somebody talks about something interesting. And so somebody said, you should talk about cryptography because I'm always talking about it. And things like that. I'm like, yeah, I'll put together a presentation. That sounds like fun. And So before I know it, I had like 65 slides together. And, it was a lot of fun, and then got talked to the group, and I'm like, well, I've got this presentation, maybe it's not a ham radio topic, but maybe some people are interested. So, you know, if you're not interested, sorry. But anyway, I enjoy it, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the history of cryptography. Now, I'm going to skim over a lot of stuff, but I'm going to try and touch on some things that were very important in history. And earliest accounts of secret writing go back to Herodotus, who was a historian, and he talked about that the Greek Demaratus, whatever, actually saw the Persians build up their armies and get ready to attack. Sorry, I'm on the way. Get ready to attack the Greeks. You know, especially Sparta. You've all seen the movie, right? No, I'm just kidding. But this definitely has to do with that movie. Anyway, he was thinking, how do I warn my friends in Greece that this army buildup is happening? They're arming themselves, they're training. How do I make sure that I secretly get these guys the message? So what he did, he actually took 2 wax tablets and he scraped off the wax, wrote on the wooden board underneath that, you know, the warning message, and covered them again with blank, you know, just wax again, just like they've never been used, and then had these shipped to Greece. And the question is, how do they know on the other side that they had to scrape it off and look at it? I can't tell you that.
Wait, you mean you'd have to kill us, or you just don't know?
Let's not go. So anyway, one of the earliest accounts of what we call steganography. So it's hiding the message. So to keep that in mind, hiding the message. And basically security by obscurity. Everybody who's in IT knows that security by obscurity is typically not a good thing. But this is how I got started. Other famous examples of steganography are invisible ink. Who here has written with lemon juice on a piece of paper? Oh, I certainly have. And then you heat it up and it shows up. Yeah, exactly. So, swallowing an object with writing on it? No, thanks. Messages written on envelopes in the area covered by the postage stamp? Pretty ingenious. Words hidden in a larger text, so using different fonts of different letters and things like that. Or applying color filters to view a hidden message, like 3, 4, and 5. You put them on top of each other. You're like, what is that? I can't make that out. So that's all about hiding the message. So here's one that actually is used a lot. Even nowadays, it has been used a lot, especially with terrorism cells and things like that, where they actually encode messages inside the image. So you see these colors at the very top on the right, and the binary representation of these colors for each of those pixels in the image. Now what you can do is you can actually add a 1 or a 0 to each pixel in the image, and you wouldn't notice the color difference. But you can actually encode a message that way. So somebody on the other side looks at the message. You can't see anything by looking at the message. By running it through a digital filter, you can actually chop off these 1s and 0s at the end and get the original message back. So another modern example of steganography. So Mary, Queen of Scots, cousin of Queen Elizabeth in the 1500s, 1550 or so, and Mary reigned over Scotland. I believe she became queen when she was 6, something like that. Don't know a lot about her history. Anyway, Mary was Catholic. Elizabeth was not. Elizabeth was Protestant. Elizabeth was the Queen of England. And there was a big feud going, even though they were family. Elizabeth
actually captured Mary, put her in jail. She was in jail for 20 years. But she's like, oh, she's my cousin. I can't really kill her. That's not very nice. I need some proof that she's actually plotting against me. So Mary starts talking to these Spanish guys that are like, sure, we can help you overthrow the Protestant government. I'm sure we could put you at the government, at the head of the government if that were to happen. So Mary was writing all these secret messages, and there's a very specific, even they've discovered the key to all the messages and everything else. So she's trusting these people that are associated with Walsingham, the head or the Secretary of State to Elizabeth, so Mary is trusting these people, and what these people are doing, they're actually decrypting her message, adding a few things, re-encrypting it, and sending it to the Spanish, incriminating Mary, Queen of Scots. So Mary didn't say all these bad things, but they kind of added those to the message, and then, and like, oh, look, we intercepted this message, and look what it says. Oh, bad Mary. And, she didn't really say that. So technically, you could say, for people in IT will understand this, it's the first man-in-the-middle attack, where you think you're talking to a trusted party, but you're not. So unfortunately for Mary, it didn't end well. It chopped her head off, and that was the end of Mary.
It's also the beginning of the Bloody Mary.
That could be. I don't know. Wow.
Interesting story behind the drink.
Yeah.
That's where we got it.
So a couple of definitions before we go on. A cipher or algorithm, as you can imagine, that's the method used for encrypting or decrypting a message. A symmetrical cipher means you encrypt the message, and by just doing the reverse, you decrypt it. So it's symmetrical. It's the same way both ways. It's just reversing the method. That's going to be important later. Plain text is the original message you're trying to encrypt, the stuff you can actually read. And then ciphertext is the encrypted message. A key is used to encrypt plain text into ciphertext or decrypt ciphertext into plain text. That's the key. The key to a lock to a door, for instance, is a good analogy. Cryptanalysis, the act of trying to break a cipher without having the key. That's very important too, because that's what this is all about. The cryptanalyst is a code breaker, somebody who does this for a living, for instance. Usually a mathematician or linguist. And quantum mechanics, very advanced topic. I don't know anything about it. The branch of physics which studies matter and energy at the level of atoms and other elementary particles, and deals with probabilities rather than certainties. All right, keep going. So cryptography, we talked about steganography, hiding the message. Now we're going to talk about cryptography, hiding the meaning. So you can still see the message, you just don't know what it means. So that's what cryptography is all about. It's developed in parallel with steganography, and there are two main branches of it. Transposition, where you jumble all the letters and you can't read it anymore. Simple example, cow, ciphertext WCO, not too hard to crack, but as your message size grows, this becomes a lot more effective. Substitution, which is the most popular, I would say, substituting characters with other characters according to a certain algorithm. So example here is a Caesar shift. A encrypts to B, B encrypts to C, Z encrypts to A. It's a simple Caesar shift where you shift the entire alphabet by one letter. So if you want to send an A, you actually send a Z, a B, and so on. So transposition ciphers, this is a good example. What they did, for instance, with this particular one, the Spartan Scytail, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, is they basically wrote the message. They wrapped this leather strap around a piece of wood and then wrote left to right across the leather, and then unraveled it again and sent it on its way. So when you see the leather strap, you look at all these letters, you're like, I can't read that. So anybody want to guess what the key is in this particular example? But more
Size of the
the size of the wooden dowel, exactly. It has to be exactly the right size, otherwise it's still not helpful. So it's a very simple transposition cipher from around 500 BC, not before COVID. That doesn't mean that.
That was my joke.
Substitution ciphers go as far back, as the Kama Sutra book was kind of interesting. D translates to O, C encrypts to P, etc. So hello becomes URYYB, which immediately shows the weakness of this cipher, which is that every letter
encrypts the same way every time. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. Substitution ciphers. Earlier example.
These are shift ciphers, where you basically, like what I said earlier, you shift the entire alphabet. So with this example on the left here, they basically encrypt A as D, B as E, C as F, and if you want to change the encryption, you just rotate the disk, the inner disk. The problem is key distribution. How do you let the other side know that you're supposed to move it over six positions? That's called the key distribution problem, which we'll talk more about too. These are very popular because you can even get them in cereal boxes back in the 50s.
60s.
Well, so much in the 60s actually.
Oh, was it?
Yeah. So anyway, so there are two types of substitution ciphers. There are code ciphers, where you replace whole words. Think Navajo code talkers. We'll talk about that in a second. Or the cipher, where you go letter by letter, character by character. So Navajo code talkers, they were in action from 42 until 45, mostly in the Pacific theater. These people were very isolated, meaning they didn't have a lot of interaction with other people outside their tribe, and as a result, not a lot of other people understood their language. So what they did is, they were, the U.S. Army was desperate. Every cipher was being broken by the enemy. They couldn't get very quick real-time communication across without it being broken. And they thought of these Navajos, if we can just teach them to use radios, and translate the word tank into Navajo for turtle, for instance, and they had multiple words, so it wouldn't be susceptible to frequency analysis, which we're going to talk about too. Here was a good example. Beshlo was iron fish. It meant submarine. They had multiple words for it. Hummingbird is fighter plane. Black streak means squad, etc. And everybody seems to think that these were the first code talkers. The Navajo code talkers have the fame, right, that they're known, everybody knows about them. During World War I, they were the Choctaw code talkers. They actually preceded the Navajos. And same principle. So they were definitely preceded by the Choctaws. So if you haven't seen the movie, it's pretty gruesome. But it is interesting. It gives you an idea. It's all romanticized, and half the story doesn't add up. But that's okay. It's still a good movie. Nicolas Cage, so what can I say? But if you get a chance to see it, it's an interesting movie. So cryptanalysis. So invented by the Arabs. been around for a long time. And one of the most well-known breaking techniques is frequency analysis. So the substitution ciphers, where the same letter gets translated into the same letter every single time, that's a problem. What is the most used letter in the English language?
E.
Right, exactly. So after that, the T, et cetera, et cetera. So if you get a long message, you start looking at what letters are being used. You start, okay, I've got 29 Qs, the most frequently used letter in this message. That could be an E. Start writing that out. And before you know it, it's like, what's that, Jeopardy? You know, where you're looking at the wall, you're like, oh, that's got to mean this, or that's got to mean that, because it's missing letters and things like that.
Wheel of Fortune.
Is it Wheel of Fortune? Yeah, you're right, sorry, Jeopardy.
Right after.
I'm not.
Away. Or,
Not that I've ever watched it. Anyway, so you need a lot of messages to find these patterns, obviously, but frequency analysis quickly breaks any straight substitution cipher, no problem. So Kirchhoff's principle, he was a Dutch guy, weird Dutch guys. He said a crypto system should be secure even if everything about the system except the key is public knowledge. So if you encrypt stuff with a machine, the enemy should be able to capture the machine, and it should be worthless to them unless they know the key, how you set it up. So very important principle, which was maintained beautifully with the Enigma machine later. We're going to talk about the Enigma a little bit more than anything else. So monoalphabetic substitution versus polyalphabetic substitution. So the single alphabet obviously was easy to crack, frequency analysis, very simple. So Blaise the Visionary was a French diplomat, and he came up with this square, visionary square, where you basically, the letter in the key, so what you do is you come up with a key that is a word, and you just repeat the word for as long as the message is long. For instance, and the company I work for is Shopinventory, so I use the word shop as the key. And then you just repeat it for as long as the message is long. So shop, 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 shop. So what happens is that when you take a plain text of variant, V-A-R-I-N-T, sorry, did I move out of, you start taking the letter in the key determines the row in the grid on the right. So the first letter, the key is S. So I'm going to go down here on the left. For those of you at home who can't see me, on the left side of the square, you go down to the letter S. And then you go take the first letter of the plain text, and you go across the top, and you find the V. And you find the intersection in the F, S, and the V. That's an N. So, as you can see, this alphabet shifts based on the key. So the next letter in the key is an H. So I'm going to go down to H, and then the next letter in the message is an A. So that translates as an H. So as you can see, there are two A's. There are two A's in the plain text, and they don't encrypt as the same letter because of the key and the shifting alphabet. So this one was around for quite some time, was ultimately broken also, but not as simple as the one before. And it still has the key distribution problem, meaning how do I make sure that the people on the other side have that key and make sure that they get it secretly so nobody knows? So I have to somehow smuggle that key to them or give them a code book on the first day of the month. I will use this key. Well, the code book can be captured. That's a problem. So the mechanization of secrecy, a lot of ciphers for the longest time were done by hand, just, looking at that square, just writing down what each letter was, and then, you extend it out and things like that. World War I was full of cryptographic failures where they tried all kinds of stuff, and people were consistently breaking them all the time. And then what happened is that radio made its entrance, and they started sending Morse code over the air. Guess what? Now the enemies are not, they don't have to tap into phone lines and things like that. They can just tune their radio to your frequency and just write down what you're sending. So your encryption now becomes even more important. So, 1918, Arthur Scherbius, he created a commercial version of an encryption machine that was called Enigma. And it wasn't built for the military. It was built for commercial purposes, diplomats, things like that. And the military was very interested in it, and they wanted some ways to actually strengthen some of those encryptions, and they asked for some modifications. So when people talk about the Enigma cipher machine, they think it's one machine, one type of machine. There are many different types, and they're all called Enigma. The Navy Enigma is different than the Army Enigma. There were multiple versions of the Navy Enigma, etc. So there are lots and lots of versions of it. So it consists of 3 components: a keyboard, like a typewriter keyboard, and a scrambling unit that hustles, that scrambles up the letters all together, and then a display to see what your letter encrypted is. So you can write it down and send it out on Morse code. So it kind of looks like this. Here's 2 Enigmas. Anybody spot a difference? There's a 3-rotor and a 4-rotor, meaning the rotors here in the back of the machine are the scrambling units. Now there's also a plug board in the front where you can actually swap letters. So A and PM. After encryption, it comes out and then it goes through the plug board and then it goes back to the lamps. This one has 4 scramblers. These are some of the plug board cables spare that go in the front over here. This thing goes forward. If you can get a hold of one of those machines now, man, that's like $1 million right there.
Yeah, they're real collector's items.
Real collector items, and if I could afford one, I would buy one.
Start a funding page.
What's that?
Start a funding page.
There you go. GoFundMe. That's that's the basis of our American healthcare system. So here's kind of the schematic. So if you press the letter T, it goes into the plug board, and depending on if the plug board has a wire or not, it can get swapped with a letter. In this case, it has a wire, and the letter T comes out as the letter K. Then it goes through the static wheel, which is kind of just a connector, and then it goes to the right wheel first, where the letter K is connected to the letter U on the other side. Then it goes as U goes to P, P goes to H, then it is reflected back and goes through those wheels again. And then comes out the other side to the plug board again, and then lights up G. Every time you press a letter, one of the rotors rotates. So it changes all the encryption. Everything has changed. And if one of the rotors has made a full rotation, the next one goes over one position, just like a clock. So quite a few different combinations for Enigma as far as how many different settings, how many different ways you can set up that machine.
But you had to know how to set it up to start with.
To start with, exactly. The plugs, the rotors, the start position rotors.
How they convey that to the other?
I'll show you. The order of the rotors, because you can swap the rotors around, and the rotors do not have the same encryption inside of them. And there are more than 3 rotors. There are 5.
So you got to know which rotor in which position.
In which position. So together, 159 million combinations. So with the capabilities they had back then, with they had no computing capabilities. it would take forever to do this by hand, right? And with encryption, the objective is to keep something secret long enough until the information is worthless. So if you can never recover the information, that's great. It doesn't have to be the goal, though. I can say, well, the information is worthless to the enemy in a year. So if I send something that they can't crack in a year, I've reached my objective. Because you can then simplify it maybe a little bit. So it still has the key distribution problem, like Barry said. How do you let the other side know how to set up the machine, what rotor to put in, what order to put it in, etc. So they had these code books that were usually printed with water-soluble ink, especially in submarines, where the first thing was not to throw the machine overboard, but the code books. And there have been raids where they captured code books. And then they could, because the machine was no secret, they could, they had machines, they knew how to build them themselves. If they captured the code book, then for that particular piece of the Navy, because everybody used different code books, they could decrypt messages for a little bit. So this is one of those code books. So datum, obviously date, 1st to the 31st day of the year. Walzenlage means which rotors go in which order. So rotor 5, rotor 2, rotor 4 go in the machine. Then you set them up. Each rotor has a ring on it that actually allows you to change the letters from the encryption itself. So the first ring is 17, and the second ring is 09, and the third ring is 02. Steckerverbindungen is the plug board on the front. It's the plug board on the front. So connect K to T, A to J, I to D, etc.
And you don't even have to do all the letters. If you just do, what's that about? What's that? 1, 2, 3, 4, it's like 10 of them?
Well, you only have so many plugs.
Oh, yeah.
So, so this is basically how you have to set up all the plugs. And then Kengruppen is basically the start position of the 3 rotors. So you start with the first rotor on position S, the second rotor in position F, and then the third rotor on position Y. I'm not going to go into why there's 4 groups there. So anyway, that's what they basically have to make sure that the other side has. This is the key. So breaking the enigma, so Polish code breakers in the 20s already started listening to traffic in Morse code. They couldn't figure out what it was. It wasn't the old encryption methods that they had already broken, that they already knew about. Enigma started coming on the scene until they, in 1926, encountered Enigma. They were like, what is this? We don't know how to break this. So there was this brilliant mathematician, Marian Rejewski, Polish mathematician, who started looking at this. And he actually invented a way to not quite break, but reduce the number of possibilities, what these messages could be, dramatically. And he mechanized it. And it was really, really cool. Most people know that when you talk about Enigma, it was broken by Alan Turing. Yeah, but Alan Turing stood on the shoulders of some pretty smart people that have done already quite a bit of work. So there's Marian Rejewski, and here is his bomba. There's still disputes about where that name comes from, because it is versus an ice cream, versus a bomb, versus, anyway. But this was basically an artist's impression of his machine that could reduce the number of possibilities by quite a bit. And this was actually the impetus to the machine that Alan Turing developed later, the bomba, which was named after the bomba, the Polish inventor. So what happened is that the Polish were stuck because the Enigma got more and more and more sophisticated. They kept making changes to it. And they were stuck. and they needed the help from the Allies. So they went to the French, and the French were like, they don't know what to do with this stuff, and they went to the British, and the British said, sure, we'll take it. And they took it to the British Government Code and Cipher School at Bletchley Park, which is about an hour out of London, and beautiful little estate, and they call it a radio factory. It wasn't a radio factory at all. Anyway.
It's a museum now.
Anyway, so what happened is that they started working on a new machine, and that was led by Alan Turing, and he wasn't the only one building it. There were others like Gordon Welchman who made numerous improvements, and very cool stuff. This is a machine, this is a rebuilt version of the machine that Alan Turing designed, called the Bomba, or Bomb. I don't know how exactly they pronounce it. The reason we don't have any of these machines left is they destroyed everything at the end of the war. And then, because of the Royal Secrets Act, nobody could talk about it until the 70s. So nobody knew what the British had done for the longest time. So inside, lots of relays and wiring and things like that. There's a massive motor down here that actually drives all these wheels. These wheels are not individually driven. This thing literally weighs a ton.
You put it in your watch now, right?
I think an Apple Watch can do way more than that thing. Way more.
There was a movie about women computers.
Yeah, this is the
WREN,
WREN,
isn't it?
The WREN, W-R-E-N, right?
Yeah.
Women's, can somebody look it up real quick? Women's Reserve. WREN, W-R-E-N. They actually were the ones operating these machines. Now, this is the U.S. version.
This is earlier.
So the U.S. version, they built not quite as many as the British bombers, but they went.
Women's Royal Navy Service.
Okay. And so they operated these machines. And the U.S., anybody want to guess who built it? This company's still around. Who built the U.S. ones? NCR, National Cash Register. Really? So, 7 foot wide, 6 foot 6 inches tall, weighed a ton. They cost 100,000 pounds back then. So $5.5 million today. Over 210 built in England, close to 100 in the U.S. And completely electromechanical machine. It was not electronic in any way. So no tubes or anything like that. And each set of 3 wheels basically was equivalent to one Enigma machine. So basically how these machines work is that they look for possible encryptions. If you have a piece of plain text, you can assume a piece of plain text. And we're going to talk about that a little bit. It's kind of funny. And if you've seen the imitation game, you kind of know where I'm going already. But if you assume a piece of plain text that is in a message somewhere, then you're going to use the machine to see how the plain text that you have could be encrypted into these letters that you have here. And that's what that machine does. It looks for what the settings are to encrypt a piece of plain text, which you assumed that is in the message. You have to kind of slide it back and forth and things like that. How it can get encrypted into the garbage that is presented to you via Morse code over the radio. So,
The ultimate reverse engineering.
no kidding. No kidding. And I'm going to talk about a couple of books later. If you're really interested in how he did it, I'm not going to talk about it because it's just way too long, but it's super interesting. It's in a book that I'll show you in a bit. So, basically, what they did, Germans are very organized, right? So messages are always sent the same way. So guess what word is often in there, or word was often in there that they could assume what's going to be in the message. Heil Hitler, right? So what they did is they basically moved that across the garbage, you know, the ciphertext, and then see if the machine could find a setting that would be responsible for those letters being encoded into that garbage. That's how the machine worked. And the moment it found a solution, the machine would stop. So the moment the machine stopped, everybody's like, oh, take a look, write down all the settings, and go to the Enigma machines and test it with the messages of that day, because every day the encryption was changed. Remember that? So very, very cool. The other thing that they used were weather messages. Sometimes weather messages, the weather stations, they were very good at direction finding. They knew exactly which station was sending them, especially with all those radar towers on the coast. They could really triangulate where something is coming from. Sometimes these weather stations would send out weather reports unencrypted, and then sent them out encrypted.
Oh, no.
And they're like, oh.
Thanks for the key, guys.
All right. So.
That's Well, for some smart people, that's pretty stupid.
Exactly. There were some complications because the Germans were getting suspicious, and they started doing some things with using message keys, where the encryption would be changed every message, and every operator was supposed to select 3 random characters to then encrypt those twice, and then send the rest of the message using those 3 letters. So they would send the 3 letters, send them again, and then change the machine setting to those 3 letters, and then send the rest of the message. The problem was some of those operators got lazy, and they used their girlfriend's initials every single time they sent a message, so they caught on to that pretty quick. And they called them sillies. Those little things where, and that's also in the imitation game, if you've seen that. How the people copying, the British copying the messages, started to recognize the hand of the operator. Wow. By just listening to because it was all straight key, you know, no keyers or anything like that, all straight key, and they could just start, it's so-and-so from Frankfurt, you know. And they started recognizing the operators. And they knew, this is the operator that always uses the same 3 letters. It's amazing.
Soft intelligence.
Yep. Alan Turing on the left, Enigma and using the field used 3 people, as you can see. One person who was on the radio or on the phone or communicating. One person running the machine, basically pushing the letters and then calling out what letter it was encrypted as. And then the other person writing it down, or if they were sending, feeding the other person the message. And then writing down the encrypted text that they then send out. So very, needed a lot of work. 2 sad truths. Obviously, momentous achievements by the British, but nobody could talk about it until in the 1970s, somebody started writing a book about it, and everything came out. They had destroyed all the papers, they had destroyed all the machines, but bless you, Bart, they kind of emptied it out, but there was nothing really left.
Was that the Code Breakers, the book?
Yeah, I'll show you there. Yeah. So one of the sad things was that all this information that they were able to decrypt, they couldn't just go to British Fighter Command and say, we got a bunch of ships coming this way. We should, if they were sending bombers to exactly the point where German ships were all the time, the Germans would go, I wonder how these people know this. They're always there. They must have broken our encryption. So if they gave the impression that they had broken encryption, Germans would immediately change everything. So they couldn't always act on intelligence. They couldn't. Sometimes they would stage a raid, like, accidentally came across, you know, a convoy of ships or something like that, or things like that, but that didn't always work. So there was a lot of intelligence they just couldn't act on. So they came up with mathematical formulas to determine the probability of them being discovered, you know, having broken Enigma, basically. So in order for them to figure out if they should act on intelligence or not. So even though they knew, it sometimes cost lives. That's the one sad truth. The other sad truth, Alan Turing was a homosexual, and that was illegal at the time. Nobody knew about his achievements. So he was treated horribly by the government. And he eventually committed suicide in 1954, supposedly by taking, this is disputed, supposedly by taking a bite from an apple poisoned with cyanide. No way. Look at the old Apple logo. Coincidence? They asked Steve Jobs straight out, and he said, "Oh no, I wish we would have thought of that," but no.
Didn't the British government at one point make him?
He had a choice to go to jail or chemical castration.
Chemical castration.
Oh.
Yeah.
And he didn't want to go to jail, so he kind of lost his mind. So that's why I say he was treated horribly. And he did get a posthumous apology, and
That's worth the paper.
So if you haven't seen The Imitation Game, I would watch it. Half the stuff in there is not true, but the other half is true. So I drive my wife nuts because I say that like, oh, that didn't happen. That didn't happen. Yeah, that's true. That didn't happen.
That's my wife about going to airplane movies.
Yeah, there you go. So Colossus was, everybody here, I'm sure you've heard of ENIAC, right?
Mm-hmm.
First general purpose computer. Anyone want to guess what ENIAC was used for, primarily?
Business.
Nope.
No.
Ballistic trajectories for shells, for, it was artillery shells, thank you. And it was always considered to be the first general purpose computer. But because of the Secrecy Act, there was actually a computer before that, invented by the British. Alan Turing worked on it, but didn't design it. And it was not used to crack Enigma, by the way. It was called Colossus, and it was the first general purpose reprogrammable computer. And it was much faster than the bombs. It was actually built with tubes, so true digital circuitry. And it was mostly used to break the German Lorentz cipher, which Hitler and the high command used. They didn't use Enigma, but Enigma is for those guys. We want our stuff to be really secure. So they had a Lorentz cipher, which had way more wheels and it was actually automated. So the sending and receiving of encrypted information was automated. There was no operator necessary. So very, very cool stuff. Here is the rebuilt, again, they destroyed it, but this is the rebuilt Colossus at Bletchley Park. Here's a teleprinter on the left, where the output comes out. This is where the paper tape runs on the right. You see all the wheels with paper tape. And then here they have a plug board for all kinds of programming tasks and things like that. I have no idea how it worked, but very intriguing.
Lots of heat.
This is a Lorentz machine. You can see, same thing, cipher wheels again, many more this time, and it had other features as well. I'm not going to go into how it was cracked, but they used a computer to crack it, which was way faster than those electrical mechanical machines. So here's ENIAC. I just went on Google and found some pictures and things like that, and used for ballistic trajectory calculation. So, talk a little bit about modern times. When we talk about encryption, they often use the names Bob and Alice. If you see any documentation about any kind of modern type encryption, it's usually Bob talking to Alice. and then there's usually a person who's trying to intercept it called Eve. Evil. So the key distribution problem was a really big one. How do I make sure that I don't have to always secretly somehow get the key to the other side before I can start communicating? So Whitfield Diffie figured out that he could create a one-way mathematical function that is not symmetrical, that would, with one key, encrypt the message into ciphertext, and with another key, you would be able to decrypt it. One we would call the private key, and the other you would call the public key. The private key is something I keep secret on my end, and I don't show it to anybody. And the public key is something that you use to encrypt the message, because after the message is encrypted, it's worthless to you, you can't read it. So the public key can be given out to anybody. Like, here, you can copy it, anybody can see it, I can put it on the bottom of my email, no problem. So there are mathematical functions, but not symmetrical, that will allow you to take the public key to encrypt the message and the private key to decrypt the message. And the private key obviously needs to be kept private. Again, Royal Secrecy Act. This has already been invented at Bletchley Park. So Martin Hellman and Whitfield Diffie came up with the algorithm, and they in modular arithmetic needed to do this kind of transaction. So Hellman, Diffie, Merkle key exchange is basically the name of it. It's very long, but it's basically called asymmetrical key. So one key to encrypt, one key to decrypt. This led to RSA, which is public key cryptography. So basically, I'm going to go to the next page because I can show you better. So they're built on these massive prime numbers. And if there is one thing that computers are not very, very good at, is that if you take two massive prime numbers and you multiply them, and then ask the computer, so what are the two numbers that I multiplied to get this number? Computers take a really long time to do that. Factor. So n equals p times q. If n equals 21, yeah, p is 3 and q is 7. Pretty easy, right? Like, oh yeah, that's prime is 3, prime is 7. Pretty easy. Now try and factor that next number, right? A little bit harder. The answer is below there. And these numbers are used for these private and public keys in a specific mathematical way. That just goes way over my head to go into right now. Well, let me say one thing. You see down there, it says, the most beautiful and elegant aspect of the RSA asymmetric cipher is that if n is large enough, it is virtually impossible to deduce p and q. Quantum computer ears perk up. Possible? Possible? I'll tell you what later why. So Alice wants to send a message to Bob, gets Bob's public key, which is publicly available to anyone, doesn't have to be kept a secret, uses that to encrypt the message, and then Bob uses his private key, that is kept secret, to decrypt the message.
Why can't you reverse engineering the public key?
Because of the way that the mathematical functions work, you can't reverse the function. It doesn't work. Because there is certain information missing. When you run it through the mathematical function one way, there's certain information stripped off that you won't get back if you reverse it.
What he's talking about now was top secret stuff.
Mm-hmm.
as recently as 10 years ago. Yeah, maybe 20 years ago.
20.
Yeah, 20 years ago.
So this guy called Phil Zimmerman,
Old PGP.
in 1991, he looked at all this stuff and he thought, I can build something with this. I can make something that, you know, makes it really hard for other people to crack my messages. So he came up with PGP, pretty good privacy.
Damn.
Yeah, well. And the NSA panicked because before they, you know, we've got big computers, we can crack anything, right? And now suddenly they can't. And they basically accused Phil Zimmerman as being an arms dealer in digital warfare. So, which they dropped the case against him. RSA labeled PGP as banditware because they were infringing patents and things like that. For the longest time, I was using PGP in email. I'll just write a plugin right there in my email client. It becomes garbage.
But your recipients have to have your private key.
Public key.
Public key, yeah.
And the recipients have my private key and like it.
No, the recipients have to have their private key because you're sending it to them with their public key.
Correct.
So they only need your public key for when they send back to you.
So if I want to send you a message, Alan, I need your public key. That's all I need. To encrypt it. And you use your private key, which you never share with anybody, to decrypt it. And because of the way the math works, you can do it with two different keys.
So that's still available, huh?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. That is actually the basis of most encryption nowadays. SSL, you name it.
That's what this phone uses.
So
Frank, this has been very disturbing. He just told me he's been using PGP.
yeah, or GPG.
His email.
Yeah.
Actually, it was on a separate email, but I had to.
Yeah, it's publicly available.
Yeah. We're gonna have some chats.
You're on your own. So anyway, quantum cryptography offers some really, really cool stuff, and it goes too far to go in depth. First of all, I don't understand it. Second of all, there's so much theory behind this. But the cool stuff is that, let me take a step back. When I talked about factoring these massive prime numbers, like what two numbers do I have to multiply to get this massive prime number? A quantum computer doesn't have problems with that. If you have if it's big enough, you have enough bits in the computer. And we're not quite there yet. But the NSA might be there. I don't know. Talk about that here in the next slide. So some things that actually are resistant against these kinds of computers are symmetric, certain symmetric methods of cryptography. The problem with symmetric cryptography is you get to the key distribution problem, and I gotta tell you somehow secretly what the key is going to be to decrypt it, because the same key is used to encrypt versus decrypt. That's what symmetrical is. But it is quantum proof. So how do I figure out a way that I get you the key without having to physically meet or something like that, and so I can use these symmetrical methods to encrypt and decrypt? Well, you do that with quantum cryptography. What you can do is you can entangle photons and use those to send across the key. Now, it won't be secret, but you can tell if somebody listened in, because listening in changes the message in quantum cryptography. So entangled photons, if you try to measure one of these photons, the other one will respond as well. Like, oh, somebody got hold of it. So you invalidate it and you start over. So that's really one really nice application of quantum cryptography. It's for key distribution.
But the whole idea of tackling photons, it's not really there yet, is it?
They can do it over about 10 miles. So Pentagon to the White House, let's say.
Or first one to the ground.
So anyway, quantum computers have bits just like regular computers, but their bits are not 0 or 1. No, they are 0 and 1. And what that means is that if you have a computer that has a wide enough data or path, enough bits that are 0 and 1, you can factor these huge numbers in almost 0 time because of quantum properties. And quantum properties have to do with probability, not with certainty. So very, very complicated. Again, I don't understand it all, but it is super interesting. So we could make all the encryption we use today useless. They could reverse engineer the key in a matter of minutes. The NSA doesn't say much. And I know they're working on it. So who knows how far along they are with that. Well, large companies like Google, and there's a bunch of others that have actual working quantum computers, but not to the extent where you can break a 1024-digit RSA key. But how far off are we? I don't know. So there is something called a post-quantum cryptography. They're already starting to think about, so what are we going to do once these things start getting broken easily? And there are lots of solutions. So that's good, and especially with the quantum key distribution that I talked about earlier, some of the already known cryptography algorithms that have been mentioned earlier are quantum proof. They will not be broken by quantum computers. So pretty cool stuff, very fascinating to me. For further reading, I will talk a little bit about some books that I really like. This is a book that, if you buy any book, buy this book. I really like it. Walt knows it too. You got it right there, Randy. The code book. Not only goes it from the very early, like Caesar and days, it goes all the way into quantum cryptography. And it spends a lot of time on Enigma in World War II. And it's not only a fascinating topic, it's really well written. The author really knows how to tell a story. Yeah, it's easy to read. So if you look for a book, and it's not super complicated, you can skip things that don't interest you and things like that. So great book, really love it. And then there's the Bible. The Bible of all books. It's not as easy to read, but there's a lot of information. It's called Code Breakers by David Kahn. David Kahn is kind of seen as the authority on World War II code breaking and stories around it and things like that. So great book, not as easy to read as code. And then I really like this book. I got this for Christmas. Christmas a year ago. It's actually written by Alan Turing's nephew. And he talks about what really happened. Because there's a lot of information swirling around, and he gives the Polish more credit than anybody else and what really happened. And really cool book. I really like it. Seizing the Enigma, really well written. The race to break the German U-boat codes, about raids and how, it's another angle on the same topic. You can already see a pattern here because I have another book on Robert Harris about Enigma, another one on Enigma, Andrew Hodges on Alan Turing and the Enigma. So as you can tell, I like this book. Now, if you're really serious, you get this book. This is, if you really want to learn how to put this into coding, this is what you would get. So this is hardcore. Anyway, I visited Bletchley Park a day before the 60th anniversary of D-Day. So it was on my birthday, actually, June 5th. And the little marker is where actually Bletchley Park is located. So about an hour or so out of London. And this is Bletchley Park. This is the Manor House. This is not where they did all the decryption and things like that. This is really just the Manor House itself. They had these huts, which I'll show you a picture of in a minute, where they did most of the decryption. This is yours truly when yours truly still had hair, so quite a while ago.
You wearing your Aries shirt that day?
Yeah. So these were the huts that they did actually they did the code breaking in. Not very comfortable, but lots of people worked here, mostly women. This is is one of the rotors on the Enigma machine opened up. So in the foreground, you can see the left side, you have the letters, then you have the ring, then you have the little green wires that connect one side to the other side, and every wheel is different. And then you can see the box where they typically had 5 or later 6 of those wheels that they would give you with an Enigma machine, and each wheel was different. So there's me for the rebuild.
Hey, you look like your son, or he looks like you.
So pretty cool. There's actually, if you're interested, there are videos on YouTube that actually shows these machines running, how they set them up and how they run them. And it's really cool. And it's all at Bletchley Park. So again, inside the machine, lots of wiring, plugs that shoot getting moved around. Lots of, I don't know what these things look like. Fuses.
Yeah, fuses.
Oh.
Bet you they're wire around resistors.
Yeah, it could be. These red bundles of cables, they actually move those around based on settings of the machine and what they want to accomplish that day. This is a picture of Colossus that I took. And so I wasn't allowed to go in there. There's no way in that room. But I would have loved to see that thing working. It wasn't at that time. So very, very cool. And this was inside one of the huts. You can see an Enigma machine in the foreground. It says on the, you've got the flag, obviously, but then it says on the right, Achtung, Feind hört mit, enemy is listening in. Because you're on radio, right? And important newspaper at the time was right there as well. That's all I've got. And ask me anything about the topic. I love talking about this stuff. I could talk about it for hours. So. Hope you enjoyed it. And gladly take any questions if you have any.
Can you talk a little bit about timer stations?
One-time pads. Yes. So one thing that they, sorry, whoever had a question on Zoom, I'll get back to you in a second. Okay. Mark had a question as well. One thing that you can do to keep information secret is to use an encryption you'll never ever use again. So that you only have one message sent out with it, and not 100, so you can start looking for patterns and things like that. So they came up with this thing called a one-time pad. A one-time pad is basically a single sheet of paper where it basically says you how to substitute letters and things like that. And if you have a short message, it's pretty secure because you will never encrypt it with that same, after you're done encrypting that, you just throw it away, burn it. You don't want anybody to get heated, whatever. But basically, it's a one-time, I will only use this particular encryption method, this particular encryption alphabet, this one time. And after that, I will, go on to the next one. You still have the key distribution problem. You still got to make sure that the person on the other side knows which one to use and not use it again. So, but those are pretty secure for short messages because, you can encrypt something with an encryption method that is a one-time use only. So the next sheet on your pad is going to have a very different encryption method.
Book code is that same idea.
Book code?
Yeah, so you use a book and your code is page numbers, paragraph,
right?
Row, column,
yep.
Any of you.
Yep.
And all you have to do is convey the book to the receiving party that was used to encode the message.
Yep.
Or you don't pass the book information, but both parties know what book it is.
Right. Well, you've passed it. You passed that information before the message.
Right.
Yeah. In the imitation game, they make a reference to the Bible in that way.
Yes. There is actually an example in the Old Testament. You can only see it if you can get to the original Hebrew. That there is a book code that was used by the Levitical priests. It goes that far.
Interesting. not know that. Sorry, who was on Zoom asking a question? Please go ahead.
Yeah, this is Tom King. Kind of connecting this back with radio, can you talk a little bit about number stations?
Number stations. I'm not familiar with the word.
So, during the 60s, 70s, 80s, and even the 90s, it was alleged to be the DEA, communicating with agents in South America, there would be Spanish language number stations on the HF bands, frequently in the evenings, and you could tune around the dial and hear a female voice counting off numbers in Spanish.
Yeah. Same thing in Europe. I grew up in Europe, as most of you know. Same thing in Europe. I would sit behind my realistic HF receiver. My dad's, actually, it wasn't mine. And DX130. Yeah. And you would hear a female voice in German, probably East German. That's how long ago it is. And doing the same thing. 2, 9, 7, 5, 3, it was clear as day. And it was probably some kind of encryption to the Russians or whoever, I don't know.
There was also the tone stations that you used to hear on HF that played musical notes.
Okay.
And I used to listen to those things and try to figure out what the hell it was. And it was years later I found out that it was musical, but the assumption made later was that the relationship between the tones was some sort of an encrypted key, because it would play like a sequence, and it would stop, and then it would play a different sequence, and it would stop, and then it would repeat the first sequence, and But you used to hear that a lot on HF.
One thing I was also listening to, and I just could not figure out what it was, and I only learned, until few years ago what it was, is a Russian woodpecker.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
The over the horizon radar.
Over the horizon radar. What is that? Any other questions?
Woodpecker filters you could buy.
Oh,
Have you
really?
seen the pictures of the woodpecker antenna?
Yeah, the Muran.
Something like
right by Chernobyl.
Right, that part of Chernobyl.
What's it called? Muran?
Like
Muran. Yeah, something like that. Anyway. Yeah, I saw it. It's very cool.
Gigawatts of
Over the radar was.
over the horizon radar.
Chernobyl?
Yes.
Yeah, it was really close. Yeah, it was close to Kiev.
Wow.
Yeah, because they wanted to be as close to the West as possible.
Have you ever heard of Cicada 3301?
Cicada 3301 does not ring a bell.
So in the early 2010s, there was a group known as Cicada 3301 who was looking for members, and basically it was like the open web goose chase using things like steganography, cryptography, all of that stuff. Using things like book codes.
Oh, really?
Standard encryption methods, public keys, private keys.
That's cool. I'll look it up.
All of their information was encrypted via PGP. So it could be identified who was actually if it was fake or if it was actually from Cicada.
Oh, interesting.
It's actually a great video from on YouTube about the topic, about every puzzle they did, and it went on for I think 3 or 4 years.
That's cool. I'll look it up.
So something from
about this kid.
from the business that I'm in, and I don't know if they do it in DSL or terrestrial data transmission, but I know that cable modems and satellite stuff, people are so worried about somebody being able to tap that. It's hard encrypted right at the first device at both ends. So the information that goes over the air, ain't nobody gonna suck that back out unless they're, you could at either end, but there's no way to man the middle of that. And the systems, when they first come online, they used to be elements. And when the handshake is made for a satellite modem or a cable modem, when the first handshake is made, there's an encryption that takes place, a handshake that takes place. And nothing between those two ends can decrypt it. the NSA bitched like hell when that first came out, and I was involved in DOCSIS 1.0 when it came out, because the NSA just raised hell that we were doing that, and they forced the manufacturers to provide the back door. But NSA is the only, theoretically, the only one that could suck that back out.
NSA got the Russians have it.
Well, so, there was, we talk about some of the services that my company provides to special air missions. So, well, the president's using the internet over, yeah, you ain't gonna break it. Not gonna happen.
Hey, Randy.
Yo,
Didn't
Who that
Cable
was?
Lab maintain the keys for the DOCSIS encryption?
yes, they did, but they had to share it with NSA.
Yeah, but I thought they were the repository for the cable industry for that, as I recall.
Well, they were, but it was just the public keys. So that each modem has a private key.
Right.
So protocols like IPsec, they're using a form of public key, right? Because
Right.
the two parties, when you're setting up an IPsec connection, you have to exchange a key, right?
Yeah, there's a handshake.
There's a key exchange protocol.
So now, what about, apps on your phone like WhatsApp? They're supposed to be encrypted.
End to end, yeah.
And Homeland Security is bothered because,
It's break it.
yeah.
Tough luck. Right? I mean, they have to make a really good case for them to get a hold of the data. I mean, who knows what happens behind the scenes? And we only hear about the NSA being pissed off, but in the meantime, they're working on it.
But I mean, you gotta figure.
We only get this much information.
Nothing that you do on public communications is really secure, but it's some pretty good secure.
Yeah, and it's really, it's about what I said earlier. It's about making the information last long enough and be secure long enough until the point where it becomes worthless.
Right.
Like, why would
Exhausting
you?
the effort.
Or making it hard enough that it's not worth the effort.
Right, exactly. If you're looking at it, well, I could do it, I could brute force this, but it would take me 5 years. The information is worthless in 5 years, so I'm not gonna do it.
There's a guy who's got some internet, videos, I forget his name, he's an Oriental guy, and he's got a video out about how things like telegraph and signal are cute, but no, you're not hiding it, because there's places where they can nip in and take it. I don't remember the details.
Man in the middle,
Yeah.
that's possible.
Telephone used to be that way, till it all went digital.
Mary Queen of Scots was all about man in the middle.
Thanks, Frank.
Yeah, that was very good, Frank.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I want to thank you for the education about my grandson.
that's between you and
Next month is going to be, we're going to have the National Weather Service.
Right, they're the Thursday night before our regular meeting. And by the way, I just got the invite to send out to people to this evening. So I've got the invite to that Zoom meeting. It is going to be for ARESDEC people and families, I guess, only. We're not gonna open that to the public
For the AWS.
for the NWS.
Then the following Saturday.
The following Thursday, then we'll do our, Denny and I'll do our ARESDEC, the way we do it, training.
And then we'll be here for 25 people, and then on Zoom if Matt is available. Okay, check your schedule.
And I could check, I don't think NWS will come. I think they're being required to do it.
Well, it's all, I haven't signed us up for that Thursday, because you said.
I don't think we need it. And he promises new videos, because every year they have new videos, and he tells me this year he's got some videos that blow us away.
We're gonna have a meeting here or not? So, our regular face-to-face, we'll be here for 25 people. We'll send out the same email if you want to come in person, like
You'll be sending out Zoom to that, right?
I'll send out the Zoom information.
Quite a few members need to do that.
Yeah, we got a bunch of people that need numbers. We had talked 2 months ago about doing a WinLink practice or practical, after a test session. We can't do it this month, number one, because it's Saturday and we didn't get it scheduled. Do we want to try to do that next month on the 27th after the test session? People, is there enough interest to do a practical? That would mean bring your equipment, we'll set it up, we'll help you get it working.
I'll send out an email and ask.
See if there's interest.
See if there's interest.
We had about 15 people that were interested. The problem is that there was a bunch of people that wanted to start out from zero, and that's not what we're talking about doing. We're talking about if you've already got the gear and you just want to get it working.
We were still talking about you doing
I'm still willing to do a seminar, a class on setting it up and using it, and I'd like to carry some with that because you're kind of an expert in it.
How long is that?
That's probably like 4 hours.
I mean, ideally, we could, well, it would be neat if we could do it all in one day, right? The theory first in the morning and the practical in the afternoon.
We can't do that with the facility I have available.
Yeah, because, well, maybe we could do, 2 weeks offset from the session. So 2 weeks after, do the 0 to 30 for WinLink, and then the next month, so 30 days after that, do the practical, because then there's going to be more people who are wanting to get it set up.
But the classroom we can do online. We don't need a facility for that.
True.
I'm not opposed to doing that.
Is that the best way to do it, or would it be better doing it in a classroom?
Well, I'd prefer to do a classroom.
That's what I'm.
There's also been a request to do DMR, another DMR training. But you gotta kind of start watching, my availability may start getting scarcer.
We didn't approve that. Well, and as we get closer to April, things get busier for everyone because it's really
Right.
nice to go outside and everybody wants to schedule an event on the weekend. And soon we need to do.
I see there's 4 chats on the Zoom. Is there anything we need to know?
Probably either people talking to each other or talking to us. Kind of a lot. Oh.
Yeah, sorry, Ron, we didn't see that. Those
That's all right.
other cryptic clandestine communications. Oh, yeah, isn't that, that book that is suggested there, Codes, Ciphers, and Other Cryptic and Clandestine Communication? I think it's available at HRO, if I'm not mistaken. Isn't that the white book, Brad?
Yeah, you can't go into HRO to get it.
Yeah.
He's holding it up, but it's not showing up.
Put it in front of your chest.
That's right.
Hey, Randy?
It's
Put it in front
using
of your face,
steganography.
Brad. I get it.
Hey, Brad, that Cryptonomicon book, I have it too. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've seen that book. It's not the one
That we're
Hey,
going to sacrifice animals.
This one's
No,
fairly
no, no.
thick. It's got a lot of
it's-
information.
It's fiction,
Oh,
but it has to do with photography.
Hey, Randy?
But what is that?
This is
Code
the
Red, okay,
Code
Code
Red
Red.
Review by Stephen Pincock. This is a much smaller book, covers a lot of the classic cipher kinds of techniques.
Cool. Could you hold it up again? Yep, very nice.
Ron, were you saying something to me?
Yeah. The DOCSIS encryption was called baseline privacy interface.
Yeah.
And they upgraded it to
DPI.
DPI in later years.
Plus, right. And it was based on Diffie-Hellman, right?
I don't remember.
I sure had to do a lot of classes on it.
So Brad, are you a cryptography nerd like I am?
I certainly enjoy it. I'm not an expert by any means, but I often use that as exercises for programming in Java or Python or something. If I need some sample problem to work, I'll sometimes do a cipher.
That's cool. That's awesome.
We have more nerds than.
Do you all know his where Brad's claim to fame is though?
No.
What is it? Was it your great uncle?
That's right.
He's actually a second cousin twice removed. So his great grandfather was my great grandfather. Clyde Tombaugh discovered the planet Pluto.
Oh. And Ron and I have a connection to that.
I thought it's not a planet anymore.
Oh, don't.
Yeah, sure,
They tried to demolish it, but they didn't succeed.
Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Don't even get me started.
If I ever get a hold of him.
Considered a dwarf planet now.
Yeah, well,
Yeah, that's right. I've heard that too. Ron,
that's not a politically correct term.
that's right. It's a kite. Small planet. Small planet.
Small planet. It's a small person planet. I guess they found one that's actually bigger, haven't they, Ron? Something that's actually bigger than Pluto now? Like Ares?
I think there is a Kuiper Belt object that is real close to Pluto's size, or maybe a bit bigger.
Yeah. I don't care. Pluto's still.
Dick, any closing words?
No, just appreciate it, and we'll look for everybody next month for our weather training. Those who haven't got a spotter, I think everybody pretty much does have spotter, right? So, you got yours, Matthew? You got yours already? Good. So Bill needs.
Cool.
Well, I just recommend, like I always
Oh, and you did go to it anyway, you can always get something.
do the train. I've been doing this for 35 years, almost 40 years, and I still learn something every time I go to do the training. Or see something new.
The pictures are good, right?
The picture. I mean, I thought you were 27.
I got Thunder Brothers stuff.
There you go. Thanks, everybody.